Hi, this is Dr. Mark Sehl for the YouTube channel Therapy for the Heart, the 56th talk. So I had some reflections on Amy in terms of attachment, secure attachment, insecure attachment, and prevention. And a lot of the focus, I want you to listen to what could have been done differently. And we're not saying criticizing what was done, but to reflect on it, because if we don't get some insight when people who have problems like Amy confront us, we're not going to know what to do. So this is the purpose of our being here, what makes for a good psychotherapy session. So the mother and Amy had difficulties from the beginning. Her mother said she was hard to handle. I didn't know how to handle her. And that was Hurricane Amy, so she had lived up to her reputation. But her mother didn't know what to do with her, I think, and part of the problem was that. And also there was disruption in the marriage because Amy's father left and had an affair. So what's important to a child in terms of security? It's knowing that their person that they've lived with is going to be there, is not going to leave. Very hard, especially when they're come up to separation, individuation, but even before that. So their father left, and she was distraught by that. She missed him. I read some places she missed him a lot. So that makes it difficult for trust to be established, and the object is going to remain there. Another thing is that the role of the father is, there are several roles that a father has. It's to provide a way that the child can disengage from the mother, separation, so that the mother doesn't become such a all-encompassing presence, and move out from the symbiotic phase to more independence. And he wasn't there to provide that function. It's really a function of the fathers have, helping the child to disengage. The mother, it's interesting, she saw Amy as stubborn, adorable, and unbearable. And she saw the brother as, she admired the brother because the brother had an allegiance to authority. He respected authority. So what does that say? She wasn't so fond of Amy because Amy was so boisterous and defiant. The brother, on the other hand, when he was, I think when Amy disrupted his birthday party, he walloped her. Means he hit her. So that was not so admirable. But I don't know much more about their relationship with each other. I know that Alex felt that the bulimia was really the cause of Amy's problems, and not the drinking. A certain defiance and stubbornness is essential to normal development. If you don't have that, it kind of protects you. You know, you can defy. You don't, instead of caving into authority. And maybe that was a basic problem with the mother and Amy. The mother wanted her to cave into the authority, and Amy had her own self, her own boisterousness. She was very loud and carried on. So, mother, problem with defiance, and Amy, too much defiance. Both had their issues. The night before Amy died, the mother said something to her about her drinking, and she said, "This is all wrong." And then Amy said, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I'm sorry, Mommy. I love you." So she was alternatively misbehaving and then apologetic. Why did Amy have to apologize to the mother for her behavior? So maybe that's also shed some light on a dynamic. There was a message that was coming from the mother that she should behave, she should be a good child, behave, but Amy already felt ashamed about her drinking. That was pretty knowledgeable, that she felt very ashamed. So she's confronted by being wrong. Another thing that the mother could have said was, and this is where we can learn what to say and what not to say in terms of our parenting, in terms of our being with another, with a friend, a spouse, a family. She could have said something like, Amy, it was my responsibility to help you grow up and to be taking care of yourself. It's not your fault. It was my responsibility to help you more. So your drinking is really on me. That doesn't free Amy from your responsibility, but it takes away the shame of it. How much pressure was Amy under in order to perform? You know, performance and being perfect. Well, she certainly didn't seem to worry about being perfect, and she wasn't much concerned about fame. She wanted to do her music, and she loved singing. She loved singing jazz and the blues and a number of other things. She loved what she did. Of course, it was difficult for her before she died. That terrible concert that didn't turn out, and she didn't want to do it. I don't know why they let her on, or did they make her to go on? I don't know. I know she didn't want to do that. And that was terribly devastating. Must have been for her. Fans booing and not being able to function at all, and not being able to walk and get up and sing. It always sticks in my mind what she said to Arthur, her bodyguard, the night before. She said, you know, I would give it all back. I would give it all back if I could walk down the street without hassle. So Dr. Black, she's a researcher and professor of pediatrics, talks more about the roles of the father and development, early development of the child. We found that fathers who are involved with their children have children with fewer problems. They have better language skills and fewer behavioral problems with an actively involved father. 6 months old whose fathers are involved in their care score higher on tests of motor development, which is very important. That's Guest Wiki 2010. So these are things that the listener can take in and go back to. I don't think you can remember all these things, 45 videos and over 20 podcasts, talks, episodes. There's a lot in there. I'm not just saying that just to get myself a pat in the back, but you know, like one of my teachers, Dr. Lucas, said, you know, I was trying to read Spotnitz, and I said, I don't. He says you have to read it 2 and 3 and 4 times before you get it. Now this is not so complicated as that, but always remember that you don't get it the first time around. So Jane Sehl, about creating a secure attachment. I talk a lot about this in the podcasts 4, 5, and 6, and 7. And I talk some about it in the YouTube channels, videos also. But being sensitive to the internal world of the child is so important. That reduces stress, and more importantly, turning into your own emotional world so that you can be aware of what you're doing and how you can help your child and what can cause the stress on your child because of whatever behavior you may be having. The parents focused mostly on Amy's problem. So I didn't see much in those videos at all. Not that they should have, they just didn't. It wasn't in the atmosphere. UK had a lot of psychotherapy, but it wasn't just around then. Like in New York, you grow up with a milieu of, you know, therapies all around us. But in the UK, well, you know, they weren't going to think about it. But that's what you could think about when you're in a position like they were, focusing on Amy's problem rather than their own involvement in their child and what they could do differently in order to help them understand their child and also, you know, help her to grow into more health and wealth. And she had wealth, but more healthy behavior rather than self-destructive behavior. I mean, what's self-destructive behavior? Are you only trying to destroy yourself? I don't think so. I think it's a symptom of attachment problems and aggression. Talk a lot about aggression and turning the aggression against the self. Well, what is self-destructive behavior? I mean, who's being destroyed here? I don't know if Amy really wanted to destroy herself. Maybe it was a reaction, a rebellion against different things and human relationships that she encountered. Everything is about relationships, isn't it? We fall in love, we hate, we fight, we test each other out. We try to trust. Trust is often broken. There's often a lot of betrayal from the beginning. She had betrayal from the beginning. Her father left her. And in her songs, what is it about men? Brilliant, bringing together of the Oedipus complex, of the repetition compulsion. She was so bright. She studied this somewhere. She studied this and thought about it. And she said that she repeated the same thing that her father did in his life about cheating on and with Blake. You know, so she owned it in that song. She was telling the story of what happened to her and her trauma, but she didn't say it in direct words. She didn't say, well, my father cheated on my mother and he wasn't with me and he deserted me. She wasn't saying those things, but she was saying those things in a different way through her music. So focusing on the child's problems like that is a way to distract away from your own problems as a partner, as a spouse. You can find a scapegoat in your own family. Your kids can become a scapegoat. You know, look at the trouble they're causing us, getting into trouble, committing crimes, you know, and all of a sudden that person becomes the focus of the problems of the family, which is very insidious, and sometimes it happens. I don't think it happens a lot, but I think it happens. The father in the island incident, she wanted to get some escape from her environment of drugs and alcohol, so she went to this island, and who comes but the father? And she got very angry because she said, this is my place, my time. What are you doing here making a film of yourself? You know, if you want to make your film of yourself, go out and have your own problems and then make a story of it. But she was very angry, and rightly so, because he got defensive. He said, well, it's only one cameraman. That's not the point. See, so what he could have said to her was, Amy, I'm very sorry that my self-interest took precedence over yours. I don't want to be that kind of father. Simple, right? Not so simple. It's very difficult for people to acknowledge their mistakes. It's human to have a difficulty, but if you don't do it, you don't lift the responsibility from the other person. Like it's, you know, you created the problem there by going in there and bringing a film, a cameraman. She didn't. So apologizing goes a long way, unless you apologize and then you do the same thing over and over again. It doesn't mean a hill of beans then, you know. Apologize, nothing. Apologize doesn't wipe it away, but it recognizes Amy as having a legitimate feelings to being angry, and also recognizing something about her father that was putting his interest above hers. Self-destruction reminds me of that incident I say a lot, and I'm going to say it again. So, father takes a child out for a walk, and he always talks about grades, and the child tries to talk about what's interests that child, whether it be a boy or a girl. I forgot. Sometimes I say it's a boy, sometimes it's a girl. But the message is that you need to be interested in what they're talking about. So if the boy is talking about girls and cars, or the girls talking about the other chicks in school and how they dress and the competition with boys, whatever it is, that's their world. So I told him, I asked him, I got very insistent about it. I said, please do not talk about grades when you're on your walk with your child. Just don't mention it. Just try it. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for me. So he did it. At the end of the walk, the child turns and says, I've been cutting myself. Child would have never said that. They could have continued on, and cutting is a very, could be very dangerous. It's a release. It was things that other children were doing at the time too. So it's like an imitation of others, but it's also it's also symbolic of something that's very going on inside that person. They have to have a release, and so the cutting is a form of release. My patients have described often the moments when they're drinking, when they have a serious drinking problem, and right before they're going to take another drink and they have some doubts about it, and then they say, often this, I've heard this so frequently, who cares? Well, who's the who? The who cares? Who is that directed to? So they'll take another drink. So what it is there's some anger, some disappointment towards someone who should have cared. Usually the caregiver, that's where it all starts from. And so they'll just drink at the person, or she'll drink at me if she's disappointed in the therapy. It's an acting out. And by acting out, we mean putting something into action instead of using words. So I helped her with it. I helped her in the beginning with harm reduction. Harm reduction is you don't do anything that could harm yourself in terms of drinking or drugging. You try not to harm self. It's not a high bar that you have to jump like abstinence only. That's a hell of a high bar, and you should have a choice between the two or whatever. But many programs have it, and people can't jump that high, so they fail. So I taught her a little bit how to train herself to observe when she's going to go over the edge. That one moment when she has another drink she's just going to be gone. So she caught a hold of that, and she observed it, and she could learn to stop it, and then she also then was able to tell me more about what she felt about me and the therapy. Modern analysis, we trained a lot about getting the interjects out of the ego into the external world. Interjects are self-attacking thoughts that you have about yourself. I'm no good, I'm stupid. So they remain in there, and how we help them get them out from the ego into the object world is by us being the object, and the patient then is able to, if we're able to tolerate it, express their feelings and anger towards us, rather than displace them from the original objects. And so it's a creative learning experience, and many treatments will fall or succeed in the therapist's ability to be able to elicit these feelings, because most therapists often don't want to hear the tough things or the bad things. They like how wonderful you are as a therapist, but often they don't want to hear the other. So I was trained in modern psychoanalysis, and we had by Dr. Lucas, I was trained in everything: object relations, self-psychology, Adlerian. I went to Landmark. I went to Insight. I was in groups for years, so I have a lot of but I moved towards modern psychoanalysis because this training in experiential, saying everything what's on your mind without hesitation was tremendous, because it helped me say everything, to get to know the aspects of myself that I didn't want to know about. Because if you can't, whatever you can't say out loud, you're not going to be able to say you're not going to help your patients say. And many training programs don't have that as part of they might have individual, but I think it's much harder to talk out loud about things that you're ashamed of. That's the resistant shame. Than with your individual therapist. It's much harder. So Amy and bulimia. So Gene Sehl was talking about the sensitivity towards the internal world, that reduces stress. it also reduces the anxiety about finding the secure base, because if you're sensitive and you provide a secure base, which the child does not have, but in therapy action, the action of therapy, you can provide a secure base, because so much energy, when the child doesn't have a secure base, it goes into trying to find one. So Dr. Sands, a few quotes. She's an expert in bulimia. She said, "I have yet to meet someone suffering from an eating disorder who does not suffer from a relational trauma." It's all about relationships. It all boils down to relationships and traumatic experience. It doesn't have to be one experience, but a series of traumas of rejection, built on rejection and built on rejection and disappointment. Also, it's filling in for a missing bond with a self-regulating other. This is a very insightful comment. A missing bond with a self-regulating other. Food, the relationship with food. That's from the subjugation of the body in eating disorders, Psychoanalytic Psychology, 2003. Well, in terms of she has not met someone suffering from an eating disorder, I'll add mine. I haven't met someone so far in my practice who didn't have some form of problem with aggression. Some form. Most of the problems that they had, are derived from not being able to handle their feelings. So that, for instance, that person I talked about that I helped stop crack in 3 years, he didn't have an angry bone in his body because crack had an anti-rage function. Anytime he got angry, he couldn't handle it because his mother's was somebody who never came into his world, so he didn't have that secure attachment. Because if you don't come into his world, where is he in terms of life and security? So, but I helped him a lot in that, and he got off the track, crack and off the track. Yeah, he had a lot of tracks off the crack, and so it was a very learning experience for me too. Case of Sehl. Sehl is I'm going to say it again. He is a fantastic. You think about it, if you're a parent out there and you're having some problems, or the child is having some problems, and you become aware of them. What this mother did was she went to the therapist and said, "I'm having a problem." She saw, though, the problem as being Sehl. Sehl was not relating to her in an appropriate manner, and he didn't engage with her. So what she was doing is the therapist helped her see, Beatrice Beebe, to see that she was seeing in Sehl's face the impassive, indifferent look that her mother had. She had a transference to Sehl. And Sehl wasn't Sehl. He was just averting his gaze away from his mother, because that's what babies have to do. If they're overly stimulated when they're very young, they have to stop the stimulation. They get too excited. So he was just looking away from her. Was not rejecting her, but her interpretation was that he was rejecting her. So she helped him. Beatrice helped the mother see that the boy was not doing anything. It was just her problem. And if she didn't do that, she didn't go to therapy, she would have blamed Sehl for his difficulty in relationships. That's what would have happened. And that's why the listener needs to know there's certain things you can do. Now, who's going to take their child to therapy? I mean, that's probably a rare occurrence, but it's certainly a good one if you have to avert problems down the road. There are therapists who do work with very, very young children, and they can tell by face-to-face interactions and observations. They studied 4-month-old children over a duration of time, face-to-face videos, and they could predict which child was going to have problems at year 1, some sort of disorganized functioning. It's amazing what you can find out if you're willing to do it. hard for parents to go because they feel guilty. I mean, they feel like maybe they're going to be found out as bad parents. And then that's probably based on some reality of some experiences with people. That's not the person's interest, the therapist's interest to find out and fault you. Or if they do, just leave. It's their interest to help you with your struggle with the child and whatever is going on between the both of you, to help you both understand it. So with Mom, if she said something to her daughter, like that time, maybe I said this already, but when she was drinking and she said, you know, oh, this is wrong, she could, I think I said this already, but I'll say it 10 times more. And it's so important. Amy, this was my problem. The fact that you are having these problems was because I didn't raise you right. What a breath of fresh air. And that's for anybody here who's having trouble with their children and they think that's the child's fault. Turn around and say, if you know that you're doing something that's not good, and you yell, you say, I'm sorry, I don't want to yell at you like that. I want to be a better mom or a better dad. So, that's it for now. I want to mention my group too, my group therapy. They were amazing. They all had, they've been with me for a while and they've all made this fantastic progress. I talked about that in one of my videos, might have been on the podcast, I'm not sure. But when they started, they all had a fear of judgment. And also they said, they all agreed that they sacrificed their lives for their parents. So we have to really be tuned for not being one of those parents that demanded in some way, unconsciously or consciously, that our children do that. No, their life is for them to live, not for us to make us happy, not to fulfill our dreams, to fulfill their dreams. Or else, as one of the talks we said about regrets, the main regret was of those dying. I wished I followed my own light and course instead of listening to other people or what they thought I should do. So I'm going to sign off with that last thought, and it's nice to be here. And what did I say? It's 56 talk, right? So like this talk if you can, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and please write me if you have some questions or something that you'd like to address. Write me at marksehl@gmail.com, and also visit the website at marksehl.com. Okay, good night for now. I'll see you soon. Bye. Bye-bye.